Okay, thank you.
We are delighted that you are here with us today to discuss building adult-youth connections. There will be an activity during this webinar, so make sure you have your sheet of paper, a pair of scissors, and a pen or pencil. I'm your host, Meg Brown, and Partnership Development Director with Brightways Learning. If you have never heard of Brightways Learning before, we are a K-12 educational nonprofit based in Missoula, Montana. Please feel free to check out our website at brightwayslearning.org for more information. Carrie Carl will be your guide in today's EdSnax webinar. Carrie is a retired educator from Southeast Alaska who taught for 21 years. Carrie is a facilitator for Brightways Learning for our professional development and resiliency trainings. Lisa Kirscher is also joining us today as well. We know and love her as Kirsch. She is the educational director for Brightways, who co-coordinates, facilitates collaboration, and implements our professional development trainings and other opportunities related to our software products, educational projects, and supporting services. She is also our tech support for this webinar. So if anything's going wiry, just let us know. And if we have everyone, I will hand it over to Carrie and we shall begin.
All right. I'm sure we'll let people in as they show up if there's a couple that are running a little behind. So we are going to talk specifically today about adult youth connections in the school system with some of the parameters around policies that are coming out from school board associations around professional boundaries. So kind of a balancing act between paying attention to where the line is and some of those boundaries and still maintaining good connection with our students. So that's going to get us rolling. And throughout the presentation, we'll be doing this little craft. So don't worry about your scissors and paper, we'll get to it. So here's our first question. We're going to answer this in the chat. Who was an adult when you were a student, when you were in school, an adult that you connected with? And what was it that they did that helped create that connection? So for example, while you're thinking or writing, when I was in high school, I had a science teacher that I was very connected with, and he was super passionate about science. I took a ton of classes from him. But what it was that he did that helped create the connection was he provided a very safe space in the classroom. We asked hard questions, and sometimes it felt like stupid questions, and he always honored that. He never let anybody, heckle you or razz you for asking a dumb question. So it was a very safe space.
So go ahead and add your answers to the chat, everyone.
I'm going to put on some mood music for a minute.
All right.
I see a variety. A lot of teachers were mentioned, but also a school counselor and the bus driver, recognizing that everybody in that building has an impact on youth and building relationships. And a lot of things about how they cared for me, or I could tell they really cared. It was a safe place. They encouraged me. They even honored me by calling me by the name I had requested. I think Spence said that. So all common themes and very along the lines of some of the things we know about being anchors for youth and connecting with students. So that's perfect. Thank you, everybody. All right. So this is one of my favorite analogies about developing trust in any relationship, whether it's with youth or adults or peers, that trust takes time to build and develop. And it's small little incremental things that happen, sometimes even seeming like they're not very important little things that fill up this jar of trust. At the same time, it's easy to kind of knock over the jar, as anybody who's raised a teenager knows. That sometimes they kick over that jar and we have to start over with rebuilding trust. So we'll kind of keep that analogy in mind as we go through this, okay? So it takes a lot of time to develop relationships. The more trauma a student has been exposed to or experienced, the longer it's going to take for them to develop trust with an adult. A lot of our smaller communities where there's a lot of teacher turnover, those students are slow to trust because they figure you're just going to leave anyway, so they're not going to bother. So all of those things have to be kind of in the back of our minds as we're working with students and trying to develop that connection with them. It takes some extra marbles sometimes for those students. I have one student when I was very early in my teaching career, and he was a 5th grader who came to school for the first time. He was always homeschooled. So this was his first experience with public school, and he was severely dyslexic, did not read well at all. And so I really worked that year trying to get him to trust me, to open up, to take some risks with learning. And it was in April when he stopped me in a math lesson and said, "Carrie, I don't get it." And I said, "Well," and I repeated exactly what I had said. And he said, "I'm not deaf. I heard you. I don't get it." And I laughed right then in the front of the whole class because I knew in that moment that he trusted me, and it had taken until April before we got there. But he knew that he could challenge me, that he could stop me and question me, and he could be a little snarky in his delivery of it, but it was fine because he knew that I was there for him. So those efforts that we put in throughout the year pay off, but sometimes it takes a while. Okay. This is such a cliche saying. I think most educators have seen it, know it, and it's true. It does matter that kids think that we like them and that we care about them before they really want to learn from us. So with this talk today, we're talking about how do you balance that caring and that connection within the professional boundaries of teaching that we have to honor and be respectful of. There's some real concerns about crossing some of those boundaries to the point that people get fearful or nervous about even trying to build a connection. So we want to assure people that it's an awareness that we're looking for of those boundaries, and then ways that we can still build those healthy relationships with students. Okay, first step of our project here. Take your piece of paper. This picture doesn't show it great. And you're going to fold it the hot dog way. If you're a primary person, you know, we can use math terms like horizontal. So the long way, fold it in half this way, and then fold it in half one more time. So you have 4 separate sections. You'll have 4 little strips. What you're going to do is cut one of those off just along that line. If you're a person that is fearful of making a mistake, cut off 2 so you have a backup ready. That's fine. And you can be kind of working on finishing cutting those off while we carry on to the next little slide. So the Alaska Association of School Boards has created a policy on professional boundaries. New Mexico, Texas, NIAC, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children, also have created similar guidelines. Each district takes those and makes their staff aware of those boundaries and looks at the culture of the school and some of the parameters that might be challenging. This is from the Alaska Association of School Boards presentation on boundary invasions, and just recognizing that not all boundary invasions or crossing of a boundary is necessarily inappropriate or is sexual grooming, but that is the pathway. So this is the recognition, and it is about not only protecting the students, but protecting the teachers and the staff as well. So again, with the awareness. So trust happens in both inappropriate grooming situations as well as good, healthy connections with students and youth. So we are going to be talking and getting to how do we keep a safe and appropriate level of trust with our students with these policies in mind. So we're going to do a quick poll. Is this something that's kind of in the forefront of your mind? Is keeping in line with those professional boundary expectations an issue for you in your school? If you're a parent or a grandparent that's joining us and not in the education field right now, is it something that's coming up at PTSA meetings or something that you're hearing a lot about? Just curious about where the public feel is on this. This is the first time I've used the Zoom poll, and I really like it.
All right, just a few more seconds. Make sure we get everybody.
Quick and easy.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share these results.
Okay, sometimes and often, mostly, yeah. I would agree, and I would say sometimes was the response that I would have had here. So it's a good thing to be aware of. I'm glad nobody's very often having to deal with it. I was clicking through the pictures too and seeing some familiar faces. Hello, everybody. Okay, so these are some examples from Alaska's policy, just to kind of talk about what's out there. A lot of them are very similar in other states and organizations. So one of the categories was taking an undue interest in particular students. So favoring them, inviting them into your classroom when it's not class time, rough housing with them like a peer. So those are some of the boundary violations. And so our answer to that is you include everybody in special treats or privileges, not just one or two particular students. Invite everyone to come to your class, make it like an open door policy so that students know that they're always welcome rather than singling one out. And I would say leave the rough housing to the wrestling coach. Another category was using poor judgment in relation to a particular student. So like giving them a ride in your vehicle, allowing them to get away with inappropriate behavior, giving money or gifts to the student. This one in particular is a great example in our small communities, how easy it is to cross some of these lines. Like I have given students rides in my own vehicle with a lot of transparency with the district, an awareness of district policy, conversations with the parent about what the exceptional circumstances were that we needed to do that. And then gifts like snacks, give them to everybody, make them available to all of them. Money, this was a great example. We have students here in Southeast Alaska that travel for sports trips, often for a week or more at a time, which can be very expensive for some of our families. And you know which kids are maybe going to run short. So rather than giving money to the student before they left on the trip, teachers often would give the coach some cash and say, you know, we know Sam's going to run short on this trip. Here's some extra so you don't have to always foot the bill for their meals now that when they run out of money. So some anonymous ways to give gifts or money is always an option as well. Becoming involved in their private life, like contact with them outside of the school day, taking them away from protective adults, talking to them about your own personal problems would be a violation of a boundary. So, okay. Invite other students to come with. Don't just take one student. Meet in a public place. I often took kids to coffee so that we could visit and talk outside of school. If you're mentioning your personal problems, keep it vague. It's okay for students to know that you might be struggling, like we have lives, and again, we are human, but they don't need to know the intimate details of the fight you had with your husband. That's not appropriate. It's good for them to know, though, that, you know, maybe you don't have the capacity to assist them sometimes. And not respecting normal boundaries, like asking them to keep secrets, or inviting them to your home or visiting the student's home. This also applies in our small communities. Oftentimes teams will meet at the coach's house because there's not like a Chuck E. Cheese around here. We don't have a restaurant to go to. So, you know, the team dinner is at the coach's house with a lot of transparency. The district's on board, the parents are aware. If you're visiting a student at home for whatever reason, make sure their parents or guardian are there. But if not, ask them to step out on the porch so that it's a more public view for your own protection as well as the student. This is an example of a policy of a school district in Alaska, recognizing those family and pre-existing relationships that sometimes make it harder to keep a very hard line between you and a student, because it's not always black and white like that. So just recognizing that professional judgment does come into play. But I appreciated the policy because it was a recognition that each district is going to have to make adjustments based on their own culture. Okay, paper. Take your piece of paper, your strip of paper, and fold it in half. And then fold it 2 more times. So you folded it 3 times. So you come up with just a little piece like this. Half and half and half again. And then you'll need to go back and recrease a couple of those lines. I think it's 3 of them, so that you're pleating it in an accordion, like a zigzag, back and forth, so that you end up with one of these. And we'll get to the last step here in just a minute. Go ahead and keep folding if you need to while we jump to the next slide. Anytime we talk about relationships with youth, we want to touch on sarcasm because it's often a way that people use humor, and it can be very funny. I've had conversations with aides before in class about them being sarcastic with a student, and they say, "Oh, but I have a really good relationship with that kid and they get me and it's okay because they understand." And I say, "Yes, but the 4 kids that were standing there watching that exchange maybe don't know that, and you're risking them trusting you because they're afraid that you're going to zing them, and they don't see it coming because they don't know that there's a history with you and that kid that you can be sarcastic with." So it can break relationships with people observing or really delay them trusting you. So sarcasm is a tricky one, so just be aware. I always want to caution people about that one. So some strategies, and we'll open up the chat here in a minute too to add some that you might have. Class meetings are a great way to connect with students. It takes time out of instruction, but it's a wonderful way to open up in a safe way. Journaling with students one-on-one. Like I've had students that had just a composition notebook. Everybody had their own, and we would write in them sometimes, and then I would respond to each student. That was a very safe way for them to communicate with me and often say things that they wouldn't say out loud. Ask for student input. Let them lead whenever you can. Give them some control and lower that power differential between you and the youth so that they're more of a contributor. Brain breaks. icebreakers, a way for them to see that you have fun too, and you'll laugh and joke around with them and play the game. Going outside, field trips, service learning projects, anything that gets kids out of the building changes the whole dynamic and really lends itself to building more connection. So any parents or grandparents, if you can help on a field trip, if you can help chaperone, not only will the teacher be thrilled, but it's a great way for you to see that dynamic shift when you get kids outside and away from just straight academics. Being authentic and apologizing is one of the most powerful things that I've done. I had a group of middle schoolers who were being very middle school and very challenging, and I did not filter when I asked them to transition from one activity to the next, and it came out really sharp. And I stopped and I said, oh my gosh, you guys, that did not come out the way that I meant for it to. Let me try again. And then I said it again. And they all relaxed. I could see them go, whoa, okay. Again, showing that you're human as well, and you make mistakes and can apologize and then move on. So that's really valuable. Let's go ahead and in the chat, are there any other things that pop into your minds when you think about ways to connect with youth and students within some of those boundary parameters? Oh yes, showing up for sporting events. They look for people. It matters a great deal if you show up for their play or their basketball game or whatever it may be. I've noticed here too in the small communities and villages, going to community events is really important, not only for the students to see you there, but for the parents to see you there. Making a point to say hello and use their name. We forget how important it is using someone's name. Yeah, any and all events. Oh, when you see their name in the paper, yeah. Yeah, bring it up in class the next day. Yeah, remembering those little things that they share with us and then bringing it back up. All of those are well within those boundaries and still excellent, excellent ways to build connection with kids. Perfect. Okay. I think we're on to the last step of our dude. Yes. So you're going to draw some lines on this little piece of paper and then cut them out. So here's my lines that I drew. Pay attention to, we're not going to decapitate him, right? So draw those lines, make the head go all the way to the top of the paper, and I have a bigger one. This is easier to see. And then his legs should go all the way to the corner. So draw that line all the way to the corner, but you're drawing that on there. And then you're going to cut him out or her.
So take a few minutes to do that, Carrie. I'll put on some music.
Okay, yes.
Awesome.
And it'll take a second.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got, don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll
Okay.
be just fine.
I know some of you are probably still drawing those lines on or cutting out, but it's an illustration and a reminder for you to keep connecting with our youth. I'd never made one of these before, so I was real proud of myself when I did it.
I just wanted to point out one other comment that we got in the chat was checking in later when they told you something good or bad. And I remember an educator doing that for me, and it definitely made it more inviting to connect.
That's a really good point. It's so important for them to know that we remember what they say to us and that it matters enough that we're going to follow up. It's an excellent point. Yeah. All right. Keep connecting, everybody. You can finish up your little guy. Oh, look at that. See, it worked.
Oh, yay. Nice. Anyone else? Anyone else finish the show? Just a few more.
Oh, look, Amanda
Awesome,
got it.
Amanda. Nice. I also see some familiar faces here. It's good to see folks. Brightways Learning, we're wrapping up, so I'll just keep moving forward if you don't mind. Is that the reason I see some familiar faces is because we do professional development. So besides this webinar today, we also come into schools and also do virtual things for small groups, as well as full-blown in-services for a few hours, full days, whatever you guys need in your schools. We're happy to talk about what do you need? How can we help? We really all are about, as a nonprofit, here to support whatever you're already doing well and keeping that rolling, right? And to really help you support your students and have capacity to support your students. So I'm so glad to see so many of you here today. So wonderful. And we also, in addition to that though, we also do what we call student-centered events. So we have flight clubs that they're called, as well as flight camps for elementary kids. The flight clubs are for more middle school and high school kids, but they have students as well as adults, and they're perfect places and environments, and the activities we do and the way we bring things really is about building that connection with your folks. So it's school staff as well as the students, but also we have families come in and other stakeholders, school board members and business owners will come to these flight club events and make those greater and deeper connections. So it's awesome, a nice safe space for that.
Thank you, Kirsch. That was an excellent description of everything that Brightways includes in our host of services. I mean, we do so much. And one of the things that we have coming up is our Educators Confluence. Harry will be one of our facilitators as well for the confluence. So that's super exciting. It's our 4th annual. So we cannot wait to connect with educators and connect and refresh. And after this school year, some of the topics included prioritizing your life. What's your why? The neurosequential model is your new power tool. Growing resilience through your support network. Transforming teens from chaos to calm. Empowering student self-advocacy through story, and a whole lot more topics. So we are very excited for this year. And as a treat for attending our webinar today, we are offering you a special promotional code, EdSnax 30 for 30% off of the registration cost. So feel free to go to our website at brightwayslearning.org, and you can find out more information about Brightways Learning, and you can also register for the event. We thank you all for attending today, and you are invited to stick around and ask questions if you like.
Thank you, everyone. Yay.